in a jaw-dropping betrayal that has left Senegal reeling and the Pan-Africanist movement across the continent gasping in disbelief. The once unshakable alliance between President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko has collapsed in a spectacular public showdown. Just last week, at the 11th anniversary celebration of their party PASTEF, Sonko unleashed a verbal assault on Faye that was as shocking as it was unprecedented. With the ferocity of a wounded lion, he accused his longtime ally and protégé of abandoning their revolutionary vision, failing to defend him against relentless attacks, and sabotaging the bold reforms that were meant to free Senegal from the clutches of neo-colonialism. The eruption of this crisis has sent shockwaves through Dakar's bustling streets, from the vibrant markets of Sandaga to the university halls where young Senegalese once chanted, "Diomaye is Sonko," with fervent hope. Barely a year after their historic victory in the 2024 presidential election, Faye and Sonko, two men who embodied the promise of a liberated Senegal, are now locked in a bitter power struggle that could bring their government to its knees. For a nation that has long prided itself as a beacon of stability in West Africa, this rift is a gut punch, raising fears that the revolutionary fervour that ousted the old guard may give way to chaos, division, and the resurgence of neo-colonial forces. But honestly, why is all this happening all of a sudden? Is there someone fueling all this? Hit that like button if you haven't already, and now let's find out. On July the 10th, 2025, the PASTEF 11th anniversary celebration in Dakar was supposed to be a moment of triumph, a chance to reflect on the party's journey from a scrappy opposition movement to the ruling force that upended Senegal's political landscape. Instead, it became the stage for a dramatic public clash that no one saw coming. Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, the fiery populist whose charisma and defiance made him the face of Senegal's youth rebellion, took to the podium and delivered a speech that left the audience stunned. In a voice brimming with frustration and defiance, he turned his guns on President Faye, accusing him of failing to lead with authority and leaving him exposed to a barrage of political and media attacks. "You have to let me govern," Sonko declared, his words cutting through the humid Dakar air like a machete. "We'll see if things happen like this. I call on Bassirou Diomaye Faye. He just has to take responsibility, otherwise he'll let me govern. He'll let me govern. I'm very clear." The crowd, a mix of loyal PASTEF supporters and curious onlookers, fell into a hushed silence, punctuated only by gasps and murmurs. For those who had followed Sonko's career, this was vintage Ousmane, unapologetic, confrontational, and unafraid to speak truth to power, even if that power was his closest ally. Sonko's grievances were twofold. First, he expressed deep frustration at what he sees as Faye's passive leadership style, which he believes is undermining their shared vision of dismantling Senegal's neo-colonial structures. The government's failure to deliver on key campaign promises, such as renegotiating exploitative oil and gas contracts, abandoning the CFA franc, and addressing the crushing cost of living crisis, has left Sonko feeling like the fall guy for a stalled revolution. Second, Sonko made it clear that he feels constrained as Prime Minister, lacking the full authority to implement the sweeping reforms he championed, meaning that Faye is hoarding power within the presidency, sidelining his Prime Minister and diluting the revolutionary zeal that brought them to power. For a man who has spent years rallying Senegal's youth with promises of radical change, this perceived betrayal cuts deep. The speech was a political earthquake, shattering the carefully crafted image of unity that had defined Faye and Sonko's partnership. For many in attendance, it was a surreal moment, a far cry from the days when the slogan "Diomaye is Sonko" symbolized their unbreakable bond. As one young supporter, Musa, told me outside the event, "This is not what we fought for. Sonko is our leader, but if he and Diomaye are fighting, what hope do we have?" To understand the gravity of this rift, we must revisit the extraordinary journey of Faye and Sonko, two men whose alliance was forged in the crucible of Senegal's fight for justice. Both former tax inspectors, they met in the bureaucratic trenches of Senegal's civil service, where they witnessed firsthand the corruption, inefficiency, and neo-colonial exploitation that kept the country tethered to foreign powers, particularly France. In 2014, Sonko founded PASTEF, a party built on the principles of sovereignty, transparency, and Pan-Africanism. Faye, his trusted ally, joined the movement and rose to become its Secretary-General, standing by Sonko's side through years of persecution. Their bond was more than political, it was deeply personal. Faye named one of his sons after Sonko, a gesture that spoke volumes about their friendship. When Sonko emerged as a rising star in the 2019 presidential election, securing 16% of the vote at the age of 44, he became a target of the establishment led by then-President Macky Sall. In 2021, Sonko was arrested on charges of rape, which he and his supporters denounced as a politically motivated plot to silence him. The arrest sparked nationwide protests, with young Senegalese clashing with police in scenes that recalled the anti-colonial uprisings of the 1960s. By 2023, the Sall regime intensified its crackdown. Sonko was sentenced to 2 years in prison for corrupting youth, a charge that echoed colonial-era tactics to suppress dissent. His PASTEF party was dissolved, and he was barred from running in the 2024 presidential election. Faye, his deputy, was also jailed on charges of defamation and contempt of court after criticising the judiciary's handling of Sonko's cases. The establishment, backed by what many see as French interests, believed it had neutralised the threat posed by PASTEF. But the regime underestimated the resilience of Senegal's youth. In March 2024, facing mounting pressure from protests and international condemnation, Sall announced an amnesty law, leading to the release of Sonko and Faye just days before the election. Barred from running, Sonko made a bold move. He endorsed Faye as PASTEF's candidate, urging his millions of supporters to back his protégé. The campaign, built on the slogan, "Diomaye is Sonko," was a masterclass in grassroots mobilisation. Faye, though less charismatic than Sonko, shared his mentor's vision of breaking free from France's neo-colonial grip, renegotiating foreign contracts, and addressing systemic inequalities. On March 24, 2024, Faye won a landslide victory, securing 54.28% of the vote in the first round, a stunning rebuke to the old guard. His inauguration, at the age of 44, made him Africa's youngest elected president, a symbol of hope for a continent yearning for change. On April 2, 2024, Faye appointed Sonko as Prime Minister, cementing their partnership as the vanguard of Senegal's revolution. Across Africa, their victory was hailed as a democratic triumph, a beacon of hope in a region battered by coups and authoritarianism. But the euphoria of 2024 has given way to disillusionment. Governing a country as complex as Senegal, with its deep ties to foreign powers and a fragile economy, has proven far more challenging than winning an election. The cost of living crisis, which fueled much of the anger that propelled Faye and Sonko to power, persists. Inflation continues to erode the purchasing power of ordinary Senegalese, with food and fuel prices soaring. Youth unemployment, a key issue for PASTEF's base, remains stubbornly high, hovering around 30%. The promised renegotiation of oil and gas contracts with foreign companies like Woodside Energy and BP has stalled, mired in legal and diplomatic complexities. Most troubling for Pan-Africanists is Faye's apparent pivot toward the very powers he once vowed to confront. During the campaign, Faye and Sonko positioned themselves as uncompromising critics of France's neo-colonial influence, promising to expel French military bases, abandon the CFA franc, and assert Senegal's economic sovereignty. Yet, since taking office, Faye has made multiple trips to Paris, meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron and other officials. These visits, which Faye has described as pragmatic diplomacy, have sparked accusations of betrayal among his base. Faye's regional diplomacy has also raised red flags. His meetings with Presidents Alassane Ouattara of Côte d'Ivoire and Patrice Talon of Benin, both seen as loyal allies of France, have fueled speculation that he is aligning with the French-backed status quo. In May 2025, Faye attended a summit in Abidjan, where he praised Ouattara's leadership, a move that stunned many in Senegal who view Ouattara as a symbol of neo-colonial complicity. Similarly, his visit to Cotonou in June 2025 was seen as an attempt to curry favour with Talon, whose authoritarian tendencies have drawn criticism from human rights groups. Faye was supposed to be our liberator, said Awa, a schoolteacher in Thiès. But now he's shaking hands with the same leaders who keep Africa chained to France. What happened to the revolution? Her words echo a growing sentiment on the streets and on platforms like Facebook, where hashtags like #FayeBetrayal and #Sonko's Right have gained traction. Posts on X describe Faye's presidency as a broken dream, with some users accusing him of succumbing to the temptations of presidential comfort and the influence of advisors hostile to Sonko's radical vision. Sonko, by contrast, has doubled down on his Pan-Africanist credentials. In a May 2025 interview with Jeune Afrique, he reiterated his call for Senegal to abandon the CFA franc, describing it as a symbolic and economic problem that perpetuates French control over West Africa's economies. He has also pushed for a more aggressive stance in renegotiating foreign contracts, particularly in the oil and gas sector, which he believes could transform Senegal's economy if managed in the national interest. "We cannot continue to let foreigners plunder our resources," he said at a recent rally. "This is not just about Senegal, it's about Africa's dignity." On July 14, 2025, President Faye sought to quell the growing speculation about a feud. Speaking at a ceremony to receive the report of the National Dialogue on the Political System, he struck a conciliatory tone. "There is no conflict between us, ambitions," he insisted. "The Prime Minister said it. He's my friend. There is no conflict between us. The only worthwhile fight is the fight against the difficulties that the Senegalese people are enduring, that we ourselves are enduring as a government." Faye's words were meant to reassure, but they did little to address the underlying tensions. His refusal to engage directly with Sonko's criticisms, particularly the charge that he is not giving the Prime Minister enough authority, has left many unconvinced. Political analyst Maurice Soundek-Dionne described Faye's response as diplomatically astute but substantively lacking. He's trying to avoid escalation, but he's not addressing the core issue. Sonko feels marginalised, and that's not going away, Dionne told RFI. At its core, the Faye-Sonko rift is not just a clash of personalities, but a reflection of deeper structural tensions within Senegal's political system. Unlike many countries where the president and prime minister come from rival parties, Faye and Sonko are both from PASTEF, a setup that was initially seen as a strength. Their shared ideology and history were expected to ensure seamless coordination. But as political scientist Dr. Demba Gwai points out, the exceptional nature of this executive duo, where the Prime Minister, as party leader, essentially chose the president, has created an inherent imbalance. Sonko sees himself as the architect of this government, but Faye is the president, Gwai said. That dynamic was always going to be tricky. Sonko's speech on July 10th was a clear attempt to reassert his authority, not just within the government, but within PASTEF itself. Some analysts believe he is positioning himself for the 2029 presidential election, assuming his legal challenges are resolved. Others see his outburst as a desperate move to preserve his influence in a government increasingly dominated by Faye's inner circle. Sonko knows the signals are red, said Babacar Ndiaye, a political analyst with the Wathi think tank. He fears being sidelined, not only from government but from the party he founded. The opposition, sensing blood in the water, is already mobilising. The FDR, comprising 71 parties, has called for early legislative elections, accusing PASTEF of governance by tantrum. Meanwhile, Macky Sall, now a key opposition figure, has been vocal in his criticism of the government, positioning himself as a statesman ready to return if PASTEF falters. From a Pan-Africanist lens, the Faye-Sonko rift is a devastating blow to the broader struggle for African sovereignty. Senegal's 2024 election was a watershed moment, not just for the country, but for the continent. It was seen as a democratic triumph in a region plagued by coups, from Mali to Burkina Faso to Niger. Faye and Sonko's victory, built on a platform of anti-neocolonialism and economic justice, inspired millions across Africa who saw Senegal as a model for change without bloodshed. But the challenges facing Senegal's new leadership are daunting. The country's economy remains heavily dependent on foreign aid and investment, much of it tied to France and other Western powers. The oil and gas sector, heralded as a potential game-changer, is dominated by multinational corporations whose contracts were signed under previous administrations. Renegotiating these deals requires navigating a web of legal and diplomatic obstacles, something Faye appears to approach with caution, while Sonko demands bold action. The influence of France Afrique, the network of economic and political ties that binds Francophone Africa to Paris, remains a formidable barrier. Faye's diplomatic overtures to Paris and its regional allies have sparked fears that he is succumbing to the same pressures that have co-opted other African leaders. "Power changes people," said Aissatou, a university student in Dakar. Faye campaigned as a revolutionary, but now he's acting like just another politician. Sonko, by contrast, remains the standard-bearer of Pan-Africanist defiance. His insistence on abandoning the CFA franc and confronting foreign interests resonates with a generation of Africans who see their continent's wealth siphoned off by global powers. But his confrontational approach has also made him a lightning rod, with critics accusing him of authoritarian tendencies and reckless rhetoric. As Senegal grapples with this crisis, the path forward is fraught with uncertainty. Faye faces a delicate balancing act, asserting his authority as president without alienating Sonko's base, which remains fiercely loyal to the Prime Minister. Dismissing Sonko could trigger a backlash, potentially fracturing PASTEF and handing the opposition a golden opportunity. Yet allowing Sonko to dominate the government risks undermining Faye's presidency and reinforcing perceptions of weakness. For Sonko, the stakes are equally high. His public attack on Faye has burnished his image as a fearless leader, but also painted him as a divisive figure. If he pushes too far, he risks isolating himself within PASTEF and losing the support of moderates who value stability. Yet backing down could erode his credibility as the face of Senegal's revolution. For Pan-Africanists, the Faye-Sonko rift is a test of whether Senegal can sustain its revolutionary momentum in the face of internal and external pressures. Across West Africa, the past 5 years have seen a wave of uprisings against neo-colonialism, from the military coups in the Sahel to the grassroots movements in Senegal and Ghana. Faye and Sonko's rise was part of this broader awakening, a rejection of the old order that has kept Africa's resources in the hands of foreign powers, while impoverishing its people. As I walked through the streets of Dakar this week, the air was thick with tension and uncertainty. In the markets, in the taxis, in the tea shops, the conversation is the same. Can Faye and Sonko mend their partnership and deliver on the promises that ignited a nation's hopes? Or will their differences pave the way for division, disillusionment, and the resurgence of the old guard? The eyes of Africa are on Senegal. The outcome of this crisis will not only shape the country's future, but send a powerful message to the continent that the path to liberation is fraught with challenges, but the fight for sovereignty must endure. For now, Senegal stands at a crossroads, and the world waits to see whether its revolutionary dream will rise or fall. As Senegal teeters on the brink of a political crisis, President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko must rise above their rift to salvage the Pan-Africanist dream that propelled them to power. Their public feud threatens not only their government, but also the hopes of millions who saw their 2024 victory as a beacon for African sovereignty. To move forward, Faye must assert his leadership while empowering Sonko to drive the bold reforms they promised, renegotiating foreign contracts, tackling unemployment, and breaking free from neo-colonial ties. Sonko, in turn, must temper his confrontational rhetoric, channeling his passion into constructive collaboration rather than public ultimatums. Both leaders must prioritize dialogue, transparency, and a renewed commitment to PASTEF's vision, ensuring that their personal bond and shared ideals triumph over ego and external pressures. If they can reconcile and refocus, they can still lead Senegal and the continent toward a future free from the chains of the past. Failure is not an option. Unity is their only path forward.